Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about how to use your front sight post to do both range estimation and wind correction. Okay, so for those of you that have been following my channel, for the last week I have been on a traditional iron sights kick with the ARs. I've kind of gone back and I'm learning how to use these in the traditional way before red dots, before bullet drop compensators, before all that. So I've done prior videos on how to use the range drum over here. So today we're going to be talking about using the front sight post over here to do both your range estimation and wind correction. So the first thing we gotta do is we gotta figure out how big this front sight post is, right? How wide is it? Because we can use that as a measuring tool. Now, two ways we can go about it. We can use the calipers, which I will in the later part of this video. But for now, I'm going to talk about like a really rough way that you can do this in the field, okay? So for me, these target boxes that I use, right, they're about 14 inches wide. So when I put this out at 100 yards, okay, that front sight post takes up this entire target from edge to edge over here, okay? So what that tells me is that my front sight post is 14 MOA, 14 minutes of angle wide, okay? And we know that the average width of a man is 18 to 20 inches. So using that information, we can now start to piece together some information, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna drop some information on you based on how mines work. And then if you're interested, we're gonna go into, if you're still with me towards the end of the video, we're gonna go through some of the calculations to which I arrived at this point. So my front sight post, when I measured it with the calipers, okay, like that, it measures 0.07, and this is a pretty standard one. That's what most of you guys are gonna have. So we're gonna go off of that. So if you have a standard front sight post which measures about 0.07, which is 14 minutes of angle wide, okay, if a man is, in order for a man to take up 14 minutes of angle shoulder to shoulder, he has to be standing at 150 yards, okay? At 225 yards, he's going to take up 3/4. At 300 yards, he's going to take up half. And I have this in red because I think that's like something that you can easily remember. You can remember that, if you can remember that, you can kind of figure out the rest, okay? So at 375 yards, an average man's going to take up a quarter of that front sight post. And at 450 yards, he's going to take up 1/8. And like I said, I have the 300 in red because here's the thing. I mean, if you got somebody standing at 150 yards or 225 yards, no big deal. You just put your sights under him. You're going to hit him. It's once you get the 300 yards and beyond that you really have to start concerning yourself with, range estimation, and your bullet drop and stuff like that. So if he's taking up half of that front sight post, he's at 300 yards. If you've got a 25 300 0, you're good. If you have, let's say, a 50-yard 0, right, then you gotta hold a little bit higher. You gotta put that front sight post under his neck so that you can hit him in the chest area if you got a 50-yard 0. And then if he's at 370, if he's at 375 yards, which you measured because he's only taking up a quarter of your front sight post, and now you gotta hold even higher. Hopefully you have a range drum if you're using iron sights where you can just rotate this to the 400 position, which is easy, or you basically would have to hold over his head, right at the top of his head. And at 450 yards, again, if you have a range drum like this has, I would rotate this to the 5 position. If you don't, you pretty much have to cut the man in half, and whatever this distance appears to be, you got to put that much over his head in order to hit it. Okay. which can be a little bit difficult because now the front sight post is in your way. The way I would do that is I would basically drop the rear sight, so I don't so I don't cover up my target. So that's how I would do that. But that's subject for a different video. So those are kind of like the cheat notes. All right, if you have a standard front sight post, okay. If he's taking up the full thing, he'll be at 150 yards. 3/4, he's at 225. Half, he's at 300. A quarter, he's at 375. And 1/8, he's at 450. Okay, so now let's talk about the wind correction, right? How do you adjust left or right for wind? Okay, so here's the thing: we're going to be working off of a 10 mile per hour wind. The reason why I like to work off of the 10 miles per hour is because if it's a 20 mile per hour wind, well, you just double that value. If it's only a 5 mile per hour wind, you just cut it in half. And I've done different videos on how to figure out what the wind is. Basically, what I do is I hang ribbons. If the ribbon's hanging straight down, right, just flagging ribbons that you buy at a hardware store. So if the ribbon's hanging straight down, that's 0 wind. If it's out here like that, that's 20 miles per hour, and then you divide it. So that's 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. So that tells me what my wind is. It also tells me what my direction is. Because if the wind is coming in sideways, right, that's a full value. We applied the full value. If it's coming in diagonally, that's a half value. Okay, so knowing that information and then working off of that 10 mile per hour wind, we can make adjustments. So again, now, what type of adjustments do we make? Well, I know that with a 10 mile per hour wind, using a 5.56, if it's a full value, at 100 yards, it'll move my bullet 1 inch, which is not a big deal. I wouldn't even adjust for that. At 200 yards, it'll move it half a foot, right, 6 inches. At 300 yards, 1 full foot. At 400 yards, 2 full feet. And at 500 yards, 3 full feet, okay? And of course, everything's rounded off here because we are working with iron sights, and, our eyes are only so good, past 100 yards, right? So I'm not getting into the inches here, right? I'm rounding this off to the nearest foot, okay? So, using that value and knowing the width of our front sight post, okay? For all of these values, right, if we have a 10 mile per hour wind, all right, you would basically move over 1/4 of your front sight post. Let me get something so I can demonstrate what I'm talking about. Hold on for a second. I'm going to pause you guys. Okay, so let's pretend that this is my front sight post, okay? So basically what we're going to do is, that's the center right there. And we're going to basically divide this. So that's my center. And then figure out, let me get some thinner. Here you go. That's my center, okay? So basically, you figure that's a quarter, and then that's the full over here. So you basically divide this into 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So if you have a 10 mile per hour wind, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to basically hold, let's say the wind is, you basically hold over 1/4. If it's a 20 mile per hour wind, you would go all the way to the edge, okay? So that's no wind. That's a 10 mile per hour wind. That's a 20 mile per hour wind, right there on your edge. Now, this adjustment is the same regardless of what distance this is. And the reason is because as you get to a further distance, your target is going to get smaller and smaller. So, for example, at the 200 yards, right, the target might be this thick, right? So if he's, let's say, that's 10 miles per hour. Well, let's say you got a 20 mile per hour wind. Well, that's just a minor adjustment relative to your front sight post because the man is going to be pretty big compared to your front sight post, okay? But now let's say you're a little further back, okay? Well, now your man's going to be a little bit thinner, right? He's going to be a little bit smaller, right? So, you're making the same adjustment, right? There's your 10 mile per hour wind. There's your 20 mile per hour wind. But you got a smaller target. so that that little bit of adjustment, even though to you it looks like you're making the same adjustment, because it's further out, it's gonna make, it's gonna move the bullet a lot more. Okay, so let's say you're even further out. Let's say I don't know, 400 at 400. Again, now your man is even smaller. He's gonna look like this. So again, if it's a 10-mile-per-hour wind, you bring it over a quarter. If it's a 20-mile-per-hour wind, you bring it right to the edge over here, right? And let's say you use all the way out to like 500 or 600 yards. Same deal. Okay, so now your man looks like this thin, right? Like this Allen key over here, right? So if it's here, you bring it over. It's so hard to even hold this thing. So if it's here, right? If that's no wind, that's a 10-mile-per-hour wind. That's a 20-mile-per-hour wind. And of course, because now my man is so thin, right, at let's say 500 yards, the movement across the front sight post is more significant. So that's why for my front sight post, it's a quarter no matter what distance he's at. It's just a question of, am I going to hold, I'm holding a quarter for 10 miles per hour, or if it's 20, I'm going all the way to the edge of the front sight post. So I think this is amazing information that I've been able to rediscover and share with you guys. So, those are kind of like the cheat notes, right? Really fast and dirty, but what I want to do now is I want to go into some of the details of helping you guys figure out what your front sight post is, how big it is, so that you can do this yourself. Now, the easiest way is like, hey, take a target like this, put it out at 100 yards, and figure out how many inches of something does it take to fill up your front sight post. If it's too big, just cut it down, right? Until you get to exactly, because that's going to be the most exact number, okay? But you can do this in your house, right, with the calipers. So you can take your calipers over here, right, and now the front sight post is a perfect square, so you can just measure it like this. Okay, so that comes out to, it actually comes out to a 0.068. I just rounded up to a 0.07. Remember, you're using your eye now at distance, so you could do a little bit of rounding here. Okay, so my front sight post is a 0.7, 0.07. All right, so here's the thing. How do I do this thing? Yeah, that you need to know. Okay, you need to know. Oh, that's down here. Okay, so these are the numbers that you gotta figure out. So you are going to now these are constants. 21,600. That goes on the top line, and then on the bottom line here, you're gonna have 17.3 times 6.28318, and then divide that by your 0.07 that you measured. Okay, so these numbers are constant over here though. 17.30 times the 6.28 whatever, blah blah blah, and then divide that by what you measured with the calipers, and then it actually measures out to 13.9 MOA. So my crude method of just putting a 14-inch box out there came pretty close. I said 14 inches. It actually came out to 13.9. And you know what? I'm just going to stick with the 14 because I think that's close enough for what I'm doing, okay? So the next thing that we need to know is at what distance does your man cover up your entire front sight post, okay? So the first thing we got to know is what's the width of the target. And it doesn't have to be a man. It could be the average length of a deer, or whatever target you have. You gotta pick something. We just gotta know the target in inches, right? So I picked 20 inches. Okay, let me get behind the camera so I can point. So target in inches, over there. Target in inches divided by the minutes of angle times 100. So I rounded up to 20 inches because that's how wide most men are in my area. 20 inches divided by the 14 MOA times 100 gave me a number of 143 is where I get my full coverage. And what I did is I just rounded that up to 150. So that's where my 150 number came in. Whoops. Hold on. Before I drop the camera here. Okay, so using this calculation, I found out that at 143 yards, the target basically completely covers the width of my front sight post. So that's where the 150 came in. I just rounded up to 150 because I can remember 150 a lot easier than I can remember 143. All right, and that's where I started working out the rest of those numbers from. So this is something interesting for you guys to work with. There's other videos that cover the details of these mathematical computations, and that will help you go through it. I just kind of wanted to introduce the idea here and kind of give you the cheat notes, where if you have like a standard front sight post, you know, you could probably just use these numbers unless you changed out your front sight post to something that's thinner. These numbers that I spoke about earlier in the video are going to pretty much work for you. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Drop some comments below. Anything you want to add, you know, I'd love to hear from you guys. If you're not a member of my channel, subscribe, and we'll talk again soon.